everyone. I'm Christopher Kent, and with me today is a very special guest, and that's Dr. Monique Andrews, known simply as Dr. Mo. And for those of you not familiar with her, she has a background in neurophysiology. She's a master's degree holder. She's also a doctor of chiropractic from Palmer, of all places, where I graduated. And I believe she also has some credentials in naturopathy and other stuff. But her passion is really the nervous system. And we were privileged to have Dr. Mo present at our immunity conference. And we invited her today to share with you a little bit about her thoughts on chiropractic, the nervous system, and the immune function of the body, and also perhaps a sampling of some.
But soon.
Good.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what you shared with our audience at the Immune Symposium.
Yeah, sure. What I really focused mostly on was how the vagus nerve is implicated in the immune system and how we might be able to, as chiropractors, impact the function of immunity through vagus nerve function. And, there's sort of seems to be remain an antiquated view of nervous system, immune system interaction. And we probably don't need to get into all the potential socio-political reasons why that is. But we do know that there's quite a bit of science to support a relationship between the nervous system and the immune system. And, on the one hand, I can sort of understand where that kind of layover exists. It was really only until about 5 years ago that we realized the central nervous system and the immune system interacted, in that famous Nature study that came out looking at what was happening with the meninges and the glymphatics. But, this idea that the vagus nerve actually innervates immune cells in the gut has been known for many, many years. And so really the focus of my conversation and what my passion has been dominated by what's happening with the vagus nerve. Mm-hmm. And so that's my conversation.
So tell us a little bit about polyvagal theory and Porges. And what I find fascinating about this is how it not only affects the physical body, but the emotions as well. And that there's actually some evidence that there's a social dimension to vagus function as well.
Yeah, so Porges created the polyvagal theory to explain why we behave in ways that we do. And in fact, when he started doing research, I think in the 60s, in heart rate variability. Mm-hmm. And then he had an interest in behavioral psychology. And he was like, why do people respond to stress the way that they do? And then he started to look at how that was really influenced by the autonomic nervous system. And our original conception of the autonomic nervous system is that there's the sympathetics and parasympathetics, and it's as simple as that. Well, he has evolved a theory that tells us it's not. And so polyvagal literally means there's two main branches of the vagus nerve, the ventral vagal and dorsal vagal. And he very specifically outlines how each one of these is a different neural platform that actually leads to particular emotional responses, behavioral responses, and physiological responses. And it's been my passion really for the last couple of years. And it so well blends with what we do as chiropractors and has further informed my understanding of how the vagus nerve really drives so much, not just of our physiology, our immunology, our homeostatic mechanisms, but also our emotions and our response to stress, which obviously is really topical today when it seems like the whole planet is in a sympathetic dominant state.
Oh, absolutely. I had a lot of interest in heart rate variability when we developed the subluxation station, and we started to look at this phenomenon. And the deeper you go, the more interesting it becomes. We see that in addition to the traditional power spectrum analysis and so forth, they're starting to look at chaotic patterns. They're starting to look at nonlinear dynamics in the HRV signal. And I remember when we were developing a system for Donnie Epstein to do some research on surface EMG, we were talking about what kind of filters that they wanted. And they said, we don't want any filters at all. We're
Sounds
looking
like
for
Donnie.
we're looking for the noise that's really signal that you're trying to get rid of.
Yeah.
And of course, the same kinds of algorithms have been applied to HRV. And when we tie that along with polyvagal theory, and we look at Cellier's work where he talked about eustress as well as distress,
Yeah.
and kind of get deeper into this. I remember a fascinating paper about skydivers. And, you know, everyone, as you said, likes to use the Seesaw Model. And they said, whoa, these people are activating both simultaneously. You know, there's really some interesting stuff going on here that deals with that interface between pleasure and terror and expanding
Yeah.
the scope of the human experience.
What I love about the Porges model is that he really helps us understand how, you know, there's really two realms, which is safety or not safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
This in life, we're like our neuroception, our brain is like safe, unsafe. And
Mm-hmm.
so what happens if we're safe and excited? So
Mm-hmm.
we could activate the sympathetic nervous system. And when we're safe and excited, that's like play, that's sports, that's how we go to work, right? But when it's unsafe and excited, what is that? That's fight or flight.
Right.
And so Porges really helps us delineate and understand how these different neural platforms drive behavior, and even how we can work to regulate that through, you know, a variety of exercises, techniques, what have you,
Mm-hmm.
mostly from a bottom-up experience, right? 80 to 90% of vagus nerve fibers are afferent. They're bringing a message back to the brain about what's happening interoceptively. And that's the really cool stuff. So, you know, if you look at what's happening at the level of vagus, polyvagal is a really fun place to be in terms of what can we potentially be doing.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of vagus nerve and immunity, that other 10 to 20% of fibers is efferent.
Mm-hmm.
And we know definitively, this is not a theory, that vagal efferents actually innervate the heart, and that's actually what helps to drive heart rate variability.
Mm-hmm.
Same vagal efferents coming from dorsal motor vagus actually go to innervate immune cells in the gut to control, to help regulate what's happening on the immunological level. Does the nervous system innervate the immune system? I would say yes. And that's not based on conjecture. That's based on data that I've reviewed.
Sure, the anatomy is certainly there.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the gut response and how this relates to immune function, this I think is an often overlooked area. You know, some people have gone so far as to propose a three-brain model where you have the one in your head, the one in your gut, and the one in your heart.
Yeah.
And their communication, this bidirectional dance between these systems is really what governs your experience as a human being and how you respond to dynamics in the environment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of my favorite discoveries when I was diving in and preparing for this immune conference was really diving deep into the cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. And a lot of people don't realize that the vagus nerve is involved in inflammatory reflex loop, and that literally vagal efferents going into the gut reduce cytokine production. And there have been some incredible studies using a vagus nerve stimulation, transcutaneous, as well as the old school implants, and how not only does vagus nerve stimulation obviously improve heart rate variability, but it decreases cytokine production, and not even just cytokine production, but neuroplastic change associated. It down regulates cytokine receptors. Now that's the boom. That's the mic drop right there for me.
Oh, sure, because of the role inflammation plays in just about all pathological processes, or as some might say, pre-pathological processes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And that's another thing that Polyvagal helps to explain. It's that it's really, it controls, it's not just a psychology is physiology. And that how we express emotionally is driven by what's happening in our autonomic nervous system. And I think for too long, chiropractors have sort of focused on, and especially musculoskeletal chiropractors focus on from the periphery out, that's where our impact is. And they even argue that the only impact of chiropractic is from the periphery out. And that's just no longer supported in the science. Clearly we're having an impact on central nervous system. And when, I say this all the time, when you adjust the spine, you're impacting the brain.
And as I've always said, the scope of chiropractic is as broad as the scope of influence of the nervous system and as broad as the polydimensional human experience. Everything is processed through the nervous system. So anyway, Dr. Mo, thank you very much. Do you have any parting words? I mean, it's hard to believe the 15 minutes is up, but
wow, I can't even believe that.
Yeah.
No, I'm super excited to have this conversation, to continue to have this conversation at the level of the profession. I encourage chiropractors to move away from fear, to dive into understanding, and know that the science is there. It does support this conversation. I think the language that we use is really important. And that's why we, participating and experiencing conversations and conferences like this are key to elevating the profession.
So for more of Dr. Mo, by all means, consider purchasing the package of the entire Immune Symposium. There are other opportunities to interact with her through the Prana Foundation and so forth. And hopefully we'll be seeing and hearing more of you. And again, thank you for your time, and thank you to the audience.
Thank you so much.